The following video provides an overview of the content and story behind Nānā I Ke Kumu Volume 3, the most recent edition in the definitive Nānā I Ke Kumu book series.
In social work, the line of work that we cover is to help families who have difficulties being able to make it.
We believe that there's great wisdom that can be found in our ancestors, that Hawaiian families can rely on their background, their culture, and their methods and their beliefs, and that there are remedies.
Why is it that we are who we are and we have survived as a people? We believe that knowing more about our history and how we got here would help us to hold up the tremendous gifts and the talents and the aptitudes of our ancestors. And that's who we are. That's what we've inherited.
In the 60s, there was increasing recognition that Hawaiians were having difficulty economically, socially, educationally. My husband, Richard, was a social worker at the Children's Center. He was working with a family where the mother said that this boy's life has been cursed. Higumake. And my husband realized at that time, School of Social Work didn't train social workers to deal with curses, let alone Hawaiian curses. And so when he talked with his supervisor, Masaru Oshiro, what should he do? Masaru said to him, if you had the free choice, what would you do? So Richard went and approached his tutu Mary Kavenapukui for kokua. And she agreed further to sit among the professionals at the Queen Liliʻuokalani Children's Center to talk about curses and to talk about other Hawaiian beliefs and practices. And so they met on a regular basis, and Richard tried Ho'oponopono out with his family, and it worked. That young man's life got turned around.
So a lot of the knowledge that Pukui had, she wanted to share it. You know, and in the meeting she said, I'm doing this so that you guys use this to teach Hawaiian families. I want them to learn the beauty of the wisdom of their ancestors in Ho'oponopono, in their rituals, their practices. The leaders in the organization said, you know what, we need more of this. We need to have her become our consultant, begin to talk to her about cases and what would be effective cultural interventions, and using both Western, and Hawaiian. And so they recorded a total of 600 meetings and consultations.
There was enough information that had been collected that could result in a book, which became like the encyclopedic book of Hawaiian beliefs and practices related to mental health.
Nānā I Ke Kumu was the name of the two first volumes, and that term was used by Kawena Pukui. And she had wanted our Hawaiian organizations to begin looking to the source. That's what it means, look to the source. Well, what is the source? The source is our kūpunas. The source is our history. And she felt strongly that if you work with Hawaiians, you need to understand and get training in what their cultural perspectives are. So the purposes of 1 and 2 was to really expose, to bring alive those cultural concepts.
It's been used as text in the university system. It's been picked up by not only social workers, but other health professionals who have read it and have incorporated some of those concepts into their practice and found its value.
You know, in Hawaii, our people live in harmony with one another.
Auntie Malia was a long-time staff with the Queen Liliʻuokalani Children's Center. She is really well known for being very knowledgeable in terms of culture. She's done Ho'oponopono work. She's taught Ho'oponopono to a number of people. She was the agency's kūpuna for a number of years.
Everything she did was steeped in spirituality because her message was walk with God. Not just go pule, walk with Him.
She was also mindful of other people's strengths, that they realized how good they are.
Because Auntie Malia studied with Tutu Pukui and was part of these early conversations that actually resulted in Nānā 1 and 2, she wanted and hoped that eventually there would be a third volume.
I'm getting old. I cannot continue this. I want people to come in and learn and go out.
Initial part of this project, we had Richard go over all of the old tapes, the transcripts. So he did that for about 2 years, he and Lynette. And they would consult with our practitioners, those that are servicing Hawaiian families.
May the speaker cleanse you from the top of your head to the soles of your feet to the four corners of your body.
So from 2010 to 2015, we recorded and transcribed all of those consultations.
80% of the healing process is spiritual.
Same with Ho'oponopono, I think. That also served as the basis for Nānā 3. In we looking at these practice interventions and how does it apply, where's the root of it, and then going back to 1 and 2.
We've always thought of it that way. You know, what are the things that we want in a volume 3? Not so much that we're missing in 1 and 2, but something that our families today could use. It's really a contemporary book in that way. The modification of practices for the people who are for our people today, and how we might practice some of these things today. But the one thing that's really consistent with 1 and 2 and 3 is that it's very much a reflection of the Queen's legacy in the work of the Queen Liliʻuokalani Children's Center. And so there's a process of the creation of the book that's very, very different from a writer's perspective that I think has to do with melding how 1 and 2 were created. We'd have a meeting, and then Auntie Malia might have invited somebody to join us, and so for an hour or two, someone would come and just wala'au about something.
It's been parallel, but we've come far.
Other times there might be a case consultation where there would be Uncle Likeke and Dennis and myself and a number of others listen to people talk about these cases, and then we have a conversation about how about this practice, how about that practice.
We get the information together, and then we either agree or disagree, or rephrase. It goes back to her, comes back again. So it's more circular, the process.
And so it's kind of a conversation, but these practices and these concepts and these rituals are kind of woven into this process of kind of questioning and answering.
We start off with principles and values that we feel will best illustrate Nānā 3, and that these values and principles are found in 1 and 2. And the parameters of it is, we're talking about healing. is really focused on how can this help people deal with issues or strengthen their family or deal with conflict.
I mean, I always say, aloha is not a Hawaii Visitors Bureau concept, right? And that people throw out aloha as if it's like, it means nothing, right? And so part of what we try to do in the book is talk about the sacredness, actually, of this concept of aloha. It is the most important value of who we are as a people, which is our ability to love, to care for one another, to have respect for each other, to value what we give to others and what they give to us. That's all seated in aloha. How do we learn aloha? In our families.
The family, the Ohana, was the primary social unit of the Hawaiian culture.
It's what our genealogy is, why Ohana is so important, and that the context for healing has to be in our relationships, right? And so who we are as individuals and who we are as a people come from where we come from. And that's our Ohana, and that's our genealogy.
Traditionally, Hawaiians, they don't like anybody at the outside from the family come in and kind of maho and ask you questions. You gotta earn their trust. They like to know who's your family, who do you know that I know, and are you ho'oyo? Are you humble? Then they let you come in. If you work with Hawaiian families or Native families, you need to understand that spirituality is important to them. You need to understand that, there's a higher power within their realm of philosophy.
And so what we try to do is to differentiate spirituality and religion or religiosity by saying that spirituality is endowed and embedded in most religions, but you can also be spiritual and not be religious.
There's several kinds of spirituality, and it basically is mana. Recognition of a life force, recognition of energy. And we have both positive and we have negative energy. And it is the harnessing of that mana that makes things work for you.
So what we do is to kind of go back to some of our ancient teachings to say how it is that Hawaiians in these modern days can reinterpret some of these practices. An example would be talking to somebody who has passed, looking for ho'ailona, looking for signs, a wind blowing through or a bird sitting up on a tree, and it's like, we know that's Auntie that came back to visit us, right? So part of what we're trying to do is to reclaim those things. Now what we're trying to do is to just talk about these as if they're like just really regular, normal, everyday, genuine Hawaiian practices. And as long as we accept them, this is our pathway to health.
The triad, it was coined by Auntie Malia Graver. And it's really putting Keaku on the top of the pyramid. In other terms, it's a supreme or spiritual force, and that man and the land are connected with each other and with Keakua. Within that connection, there's aloha, there's lokahi, there's malama, ho'oponopono. She said, when things are out of balance, the man and the environment suffers. So there's something about spirituality taking care of aina. So it feeds us and taking care of ourselves.
That triad, for us, is the graphics of a triangle, one in which the sides are equal, meaning equally important, equally deserving of the respect for the sacredness of each component. Hawaiians recognize that. So built into their living practices were ways to give back.
One of the key principles of the book is this concept of form and essence, which really has come primarily from Auntie Lynette and Uncle Richard Paglinawan. One of the examples in the book is Auntie and Uncle commenting on Mary Monarch. So much emphasis on form, the precision of form. But you can just feel the dancers who have the whole thing. Their entire soul is coming through in every part of their body. And that's what we would call essence.
When you're learning a physical activity, you learn the routine, you learn the position, but that physical activity is not going to help you unless you put all of your effort into it. So when one is asked to do the spiritual part of tradition, you would have to ask yourself, am I just doing it from here? Or am I doing it from inside? Your mindset has to be such that you believe. And you believe not just with the brain, but you believe with your whole being.
If you do stuff without that conscious, mindful connection to the meaning of that task, then it's just a form. It's kind of like practicing what you preach, right? But the practice is who you are as a person, and how you are as a person, how you present yourself to others, and how you think and feel about your kuleana to so much more than yourself. A huge section of Volume 1 was dealing with grief and loss protocols and rituals. So the only time you would use some of these very, very important practices was when somebody died. In this volume, we're actually not going to talk about grief and loss with someone who has died. But what we're going to talk about is grief and loss and what protocols around the dying might apply for somebody that is lost to you. When somebody is lost to drug addiction, is lost to the criminal justice system, is lost to homelessness, is lost to the child welfare system, we know they're still alive. All of us are dealing with this, what we call grieving in place, the loss of people that we cannot see, we cannot touch, we don't have access to, and we don't exactly know when that's going to be. And in some ways, that's the worst kind of grief to have, because you always wonder, will I see them again?
There's a huge resurgence of knowledge about the truth of what the influence of Westernization has done to us. And I have to admit that when colonization happened to our people, they did such a good job that it removed the healthy practices, removed it to such an extent that our families were left with Hawaiian problems, but no Hawaiian solutions.
The colonization process, in and of itself, results in the destruction of an indigenous culture. That's just how it works. Whether or not it's intended, that is the result of it. And so historical and cultural trauma says that when you have colonization, you're going to lose something that was originally there that you kind of can't get back. There is something that happens to the spirit and the mind and the body of the surviving generations. There's something that's left over.
And all of the literature that you read about generational trauma or cultural trauma says that it does get transmitted unconsciously. And sometimes it manifests itself in people not doing well in society.
We have trouble staying in school. We have trouble not getting addicted to drugs. We have trouble with violence in our families and our communities. But a lot of people in this generation, many hundreds and hundreds of years later, say, well, you know, that's just how Hawaiians are. Those of us who study intergenerational or cultural trauma say, that's not who we are as a people, and we should not accept that that's just how we are. We should not accept that as a legacy of our ancestors. That's not who we were intended to be, and that's not who we need to be. And we believe that knowing more about our history and how we got here would help us to hold up the tremendous gifts and the talents and the aptitudes of our ancestors that will not only heal us from the trauma of the past, but will preserve and protect us for the generations to come. And that's what this book is really about.
Liliʻuokalani Children's Center in 1971 received funding for a project to test out whether or not ho'oponopono, a traditional Hawaiian practice, quotes family therapy, could be used with families in the 20th century. The result of one of the families was that the father of the household became so familiar with the process, he learned to do it without recognizing that he was doing it. So it was transferable. And it proved to me that ho'oponopono is so remarkable. It connects our families of today with a practice of our ancestors that helps to heal them, that the aloha they have inside of them can be doubled, can be tripled. It brings them closer in a positive, binding, healing way.
This book is primarily written with the Hawaiian families in mind and for them to learn about their cultural healing practices.
I want them to know that wherever they're at in life, they will always encounter situations that they find difficult or that maybe they feel stuck in. I want them to know that within the Hawaiian lifestyle, for every problem, there is a Hawaiian solution. It takes practice, it takes perseverance, but you get rewarded in the end.
You have to do it with a seriousness of purpose and a seriousness of honoring your ancestors, because that's why you do these things. It's not for yourself, but you do it to honor your ancestors who allowed this knowledge now to be accessible to you. But you also do it for all the generations to come who will survive long after you.
Because we want our great-grandchildren and the great-great-grandchildren to be able to enjoy the Hawaii'ne that we know, that we've had, and we know that is possible.